Kuna sababu tulikuwa tumesifungia kwa nyumba, ni sauti ulikuwa unasikia kwa umbali vile wanasema. Waliingia kwa milango yote wakikata. Hiyo yangu ilikuwa imeanzia kwa geti na hiyo nyingine ya watoto ilikuwa opposite. Wakakata hiyo, kakuta mzee alikuwa hapo pamoja na mtoto huyo mdogo. Kusifungia walikanyanga mlango, kaingia nayo. Kuingia nayo bila niliona wako na mapanga, marungu na nini. Mimi niliamka tu nikitetemeka, nikamwambia tafadhali vijana wangu, hebu nini? Kaniambia ni nyamazi. Wanataka kufanya ile kazi kibaki alisema wafanye. Na nikaambiwa nikijaribu kupiga nduru hivi, sasa nilikuwa nimewekewa panga hapa na mashuma. Nikijaribu kupiga nduru wataniua.
Mie hapa naimba kwa furaha. Mie hapa naimba kwa furaha. Naipenda kazi yangu, kazi ya muziki. Naipenda kazi yangu, kazi ya muziki. Mtanisema mwisho mtachoka. Mtanisema mwisho mtachoka. Sitaziacha ngoma zetu Afrika. Sitaziacha ngoma zetu Afrika.
The International Criminal Court pretrial chamber has already determined that there is evidence of sexual violence in Kenya intended to harm specific communities. These cases are significant because attacks against a racial, national, ethnic, cultural, religious, or gender group may meet the definition of a crime against humanity or even genocide.
The perpetrators mainly from a tribe of another tribe from the survivor. So you find, especially in the Rift Valley, it was maybe the Kalenjins against the Kikuyus. But in Kibera, it was both. There were Kikuyus, Mongekis against who would attack camps, because even in the slum there are some regions that are purely populated by Luo and another region, a neighboring region populated by Kikuyus. So there would be counter attacks. Yeah, so you find the Kikuyus will say I was raped by a Luo, and a Luo will say I was raped by a Kikuyu.
Okay.
Yeah.
Of course the violence was brought by the tribal and ethnic tension, yeah. So again, with the insecurity that was happening then, again, because we had incidences where racist party supporters, for example, of a certain party were just chanting and moving, in the slums or in the estates, then they would break into a house and, kill and even rape the mother and the daughters in the house. In the Mount Elgon, because these are women who I managed to be with for about 3 days, and of course it was not just the medical treatment, but the talking and debriefing and all that. Yes, they did. They mentioned that, yeah, just because they're from a certain community, then they were being attacked.
Yeah. They took that is the line that you move out of our land. You came here and grabbed land and so on and so forth. So there was some ethnicity in it. But from the police perspective, we have deliberately avoided the issue of ethnicity in it. We would be more pleased if we limited ourselves to incitement to violence and individual criminal acts.
Surprisingly few records were kept during the violence that noted the ethnicity of the victim or the perpetrator. Health workers, when taking a patient's history, did not, for the most part, ask about ethnic or tribal background or causes of violence.
They are logs. Probably not to the extent that you're asking. Like at that time, you would not dare ask anybody their tribe. But we can infer it from the name. Yeah. Yes.
Though formal records were not kept, counseling sessions after the violence revealed anecdotal evidence enough to convince health workers and legal aid providers that the violence was driven mainly by ethnicity.
But during the support group, which is usually once a month at Kenyatta National Hospital. You find they will, as they are sharing, they will say I was raped by people from another tribe. Yeah, so that's how we know that it was a tribe against tribe.
Yes, because mostly the rapes would happen. They maybe ask you, something in the ethnic language, and if you're not able to reply. So this we got from the clans, from the sessions that we had with the clans. Then they'll rape you, or they'll rape you or assault you physically just because you're from a certain tribe. Yes.
Many blame politicians in both camps for dividing people along ethnic and tribal lines in order to maintain their respective popularity. One expert on the implementation of international criminal law writes, "The political class skilled in the act of tribal manipulation has deeply polarized Kenya by elevating ethnic favoritism over performance and merit. Consequently, most Kenyan citizens still have their tent of loyalties pitched toward their tribe rather than their country." There is evidence that influential individuals funded and supported gangs with tribal identities to attack opponent groups and fuel the chaos following the elections.
Funded by politicians and local businessmen who had a lot to lose if they didn't remain in power. Yes, largely that. I mean, the role of the state is very visible, and these are youths who are very organized, well equipped. So I think tribal is there, but I think poverty and power.
From consumption up the ladder up until the point at where the volcano erupts. That is a job which was done very well and consciously by politicians. I never apologize for saying that politicians deliberately prepared people for the path and facilitated for it. And we have a responsibility to rewind that. Yeah.
So then you could see there was the gangs and the youth, and there was also the role of the state. But in Kisumu, for instance, all the postmortems that we did, all of them were killed by had firearm injuries. So then it's very easy to extrapolate on what kind of violence was in Kisumu. There was obviously state against the community, versus in Nairobi, where it was just tribes against tribes and state against the community as well. Rift Valley was also quite mixed, but Rift Valley had more of the improvised weapons, which tells you again that was, tribes versus tribes, and Atieno versus Kamau. I mean, basically looking at the tribes. Yeah.
The interviewees in this study collectively confirmed that hundreds of the survivors who sought treatment or legal advice chose not to report the crime to the police. Michael Wachira, a crew program officer, similarly reported that 82% of survivors who reported sexual violence to crew didn't formally report the sexual and gender-based violence incidents to the police.
Yes, the cases we see at the center, only about 15% are reported to the police.
Only 1/5?
Yeah, 15% are reported to the police. For different reasons. One, to some of the clients, it's not a priority. They just want to come get treated and go away. For others, it's accessibility, being able to access the whole process. For others, it's affordability. For others, it's the duration at which the cases take to the end, so they find that cumbersome. Others, it's the reception. They fear to have like double trauma. They're thinking, okay, I've had the guts to collect myself and go to the doctor. Then you go to the police and, you looked at like, okay, so what were you doing out at that particular point of, at night? Or, were you badly dressed, or did you provoke the perpetrator? So those are some of the reasons.
But where the witness is making the decision against the whole community, that we still we have some cultural setups which are still relatively strong against the individual, because where you are being taught that our clan has decided to take the compensation and the clan of the criminal is willing to pay. So what other justice are you talking about?
Police. But we find that most times the victims come to IMLU without having reported to police. So that tells you it's actually IMLU's impetus that makes the case actually go a little bit further. So from that you can probably infer that most people don't report it. And that's a known fact, that most people don't report it. Yeah. They probably seek treatment quietly, if they seek treatment, depending on the severity, but most times it's silent.
Yeah.
I think it's so cultural. I think that the cultural element is so strong, because even I know somebody, I would say a colleague, doctor, well-educated, master's student, 2 years ago, and she was a victim. She didn't report it. She sought treatment. She didn't report it, and that's an informed, empowered person. So that you can naturally infer then what happens to the majority of Kenyans who are not educated, do not have resources. Yes.
You really encourage them to report, but they have an option. They can report or not report. And you're not going to deny them any medical care because they have not reported. But we emphasize that it's a crime and there is need to report. Yeah. 40% don't report, but 60% usually report, because some of them, as I would say, they are accompanied by the police. And the clinician also emphasizes the need for reporting. Yeah.
Of the victims who didn't report sexual and gender-based violent crimes to the police, 45% declined to do so, quote, because they assumed nothing would be done. A recent study on sexual and gender-based violence and insecurity in the Kibera slums by Amnesty International found that most women interviewed did not believe that female victims of violence could get any justice, as the criminal law system barely functioned.
The police really, people don't have a lot of faith in the justice system in this country. And like you say, the negative attitudes, like Faith says, you don't want to go to a police station, somebody's yelling at you. I just got raped, nobody's helping me. Yeah. So you find that most people will not report just because the police just don't help.
Pangani is just a case in point, as the police, they have very bad attitudes. We went there just to do a follow-up on a woman who had been set ablaze by the husband. And the woman we found on the OB desk, she was so rude. And it's like, it's just okay for a woman to be burnt by her husband. They'll settle it at home. And it's a woman who's saying this. And she had such a bad attitude to a degree until we just had like to humble ourselves, to plead with her to help us.
Of just laziness. If they were pushed to do it, they actually would. And because nobody is pushing them, they sit back.
In my experience, it's only SGBV that they need follow-up. But criminal cases like theft, fraud, murder, they do it by their own initiative. But come to GBV cases,
that's a very good reason actually for them not following up. GBV is they just think whatever. It's not serious.
A
family issue.
It's a family affair.
Actually, it's the victim's fault. What were you wearing?
That's the thing. You know, they ask you that. You entered his car. You went and met him in a restaurant. Why?
You're too pretty. You know, you under GBV for ugly women. You know, such reasons. Some women, some people will not report.